Well, a very good Friday morning to you, and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. I'm Keaton Shah, and I'm very pleased that it's Friday, but I'm also very happy that you're joining us this morning for the discussions, because alongside me is my co-host and colleague for a packed program this morning, Mr. Sean Michael Small. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton. And before viewers think that the PAC program just is about me, no, he doesn't just mean that Keaton and I together make a PAC program. This is the usual program, but we are joined by a couple of other familiar faces, yes, but we're going to have a pretty stuffed start of the show this morning.
Familiar faces, all right, because with us is a former youth parliamentarian, specially invited for this morning's discussions, and that is Kemuel Pascal. Good morning, Kemuel.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning to Sean as well. Good morning to all your viewers and listeners. It is my pleasure to be here on this lovely Friday morning.
Kemuel, it's a pleasure to have you once more with us. And also, it's always a pleasure to see a familiar face, especially one that's bright and smiling. I guess she's cheerful that it's Friday as well. Because with us, via Zoom, is our counterpart, our colleague in Tobago, Dr. Faith B. Israel. Good morning, Dr. B. Israel, and welcome to Talking Point.
Good morning, good morning. Yes, I am happy that I'm here this morning, having some internet challenges, but, we're doing the best that we can. But yes, I'm happy to be here.
Dr. B. Israel, if you have TSTT as your internet provider, I completely understand. But nevertheless, we're happy to see you.
We are not commenting about any particular internet provider, but we are having significant challenges this morning.
Anyway, Dr. B. Israel, well, yesterday, a 3.5-hour budget presentation, budget estimates for financial year 2022-2023, the first of the Progressive Democratic Patriots-led THA, themed towards a smarter, greener, more autonomous Tobago. This was led by Chief Secretary, who's also Secretary for the Economy in Tobago, that is Mr. Farley Augustine. Now, this budget focused heavily on self-governance, foreign direct investment, as well as food security for the island. First thing I'm going to ask you, Dr. B. Israel, is $3.97 million, which is roughly 6.9%. Billion dollars, which is roughly 6.9% of our national budget. Fingers crossed that you guys would be getting this when the Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert, reads his budget for the national economy come October.
Yes, so it was a very lengthy. We were sitting there and thinking, wow, he is not coming to an end. The papers are stacked, and I'm looking at the stack of papers and they're not going down at all. But it was an enjoyable budget. It outlined, I think, the PDP's vision and the PDP's mandate, at least for the next. So yes, we do budgets yearly, but this, because it was our first budget, we felt it necessary to kind of lay a very solid foundation for what we will do, at least for these first 4 years, and then as we move forward. So yes, the budget 3.97 billion, which is about the 6.9% of what we estimate to be the national budget coming up. That number, of course, as he explained, the Tobago House of Assembly has a very special kind of arrangement with the central government, where a couple of years ago, we basically went to court. It was a dispute resolution commission, and the dispute resolution commission said that the THA should get at least 4.03 to 6.9% of the budget. And we've never gotten anywhere close to the 6.9% of the budget. But last year and the year before, during the autonomy discussions and the autonomy bills discussions, the government said that they were willing to give us 6.8% in that new bill. So since that was a big chunk, a big part of the discussion last year and the year before going into the autonomy bill discussion, we hope that they are ready to show Tobago and Tobagonians and all of Trinidad and Tobago that they were really serious. Because even though those bills were not passed, even though they never even really made it onto the floor of the parliament to have a debate and to have a vote, we are hoping that because of what is already in the law, that they will show good faith to Tobagonians, that they are willing to give us that 6.9% because the law already allows for it. They did not need the bills to do that. The current dispensation, the current laws allow for it, and we're hoping they follow through with what they said they were willing to do for Tobago.
Well, Dr. B. Israel, another aspect in relation to this, what they would be doing for Tobago, is the conversation surrounding a very big point, actually, the THA outpost to be located in Pembroke Street. This is also to push for self-governance and Tobago economy. It's also in line with the establishment of a new office, the Office of the Deputy Chief Secretary. One of the criticisms that we've heard from the minority in Tobago is the fact that this budget and the conversation surrounding the budget didn't sound as though there could be any sort of partnership or willingness to work together. It sounded more antagonistic. How does the PDP respond to that? And if I may just add very quickly, the fact that Mr. Farley Augustine stated that they would be deliberately disrupting national parliament.
So when we say deliberately disrupting national parliament, what we are speaking about specifically is the process that has been taken several times before to get Tobago autonomy, that Tobago autonomy issue. And what he spoke about was the fact that we have gone through this very cycle over and over and over and over and over and over again. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we are going to take a different path to have a different result. The result that we want, autonomy for Tobago. The path that we've been taking before, we sit back in Tobago, they come to Tobago, do a couple consultations, have a couple meetings, they go back to Parliament, and then within Parliament, they do what they wish in Parliament. And so when we say we are going to disrupt, what we're talking about is disrupting that process where the Tobago part of it seems to happen in Tobago, and then what happens in Trinidad in Parliament seems to be very removed from what is happening on the ground in Tobago. So that is what we're talking about. It is to come and be a part of that process in Parliament. Because you know what? I don't think that people realize the number of Tobagonians. So Tobago, we have maybe 60 or so last census, which was 11 years ago, says that there are about 60,000 of us on this island. But we are also very familiar with the fact that for probably every one or two of us on the island, there's at least one or two of us as in Tobagonians living in Trinidad who also need to be a part of this process. And the Parliament needs to recognize that when we are speaking about Tobago, we are not just speaking about those who are on the island in Tobago, but we are also speaking about the Tobagonians who actively contribute to the economy known as Trinidad on the island of Trinidad, and all of this needs to be taken into account. So it's not adversarial. We are just using a different strategy, and we are putting the Parliament on notice, putting the Tobago-born Prime Minister on notice that we're not going to use the same mechanisms that we've been using all of these last 40 or so years. The PDP, as we have shown to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that we are very willing to use very unconventional mechanisms, and it's the same unconventional mechanism that got us to the point where we are now 14-1 in the Tobago space, coming out of a situation where the party is 5 years old? That is what we're talking about. We are willing to do this differently. It's not antagonistic, but we're doing it differently.
Dr. B. Israel, part of the presentation included cluing us in with regards to the situation with the airport not being open as late as the Chief Secretary and I assume the Secretary of Tourism would have liked to see, because it limits the amount of flights that Caribbean Airlines could have on a daily basis. And then, of course, there is the question of Caribbean Airlines and how much flights it's committed to as the situation recovers back to normal, and what might be that economic balance point that they have to figure out. Now, with that said, one of the things that the Chief Secretary did point out is that the operational cost that was given to him or put forward to him as the reason why the airport was not open until 1:32 a.m. in order to have flights that late is a cost of only $16,800 a day, a cost which he said that the THA was willing to foot the bill for as part of the funds available to deal with the air bridge, I believe. And I thought it was very interesting and very commendable that essentially, here's the Chief Secretary of Tobago House of Assembly saying, we are willing to put our money where our mouth is. We are willing to take on the responsibilities. That's why we want these resources, because, and he included the fact that, and I believe he was alluding to the situation with NEDCO, where certain government agencies basically assumed that they could move ahead because ultimately the parties of the THA and central government were aligned. And the actual official processes of responsibilities of the various sections on the THA weren't necessarily seen to. So is this budget ultimately the Tobago House Assembly saying, listen, we need to realign these things as how they are supposed to be, as how they are written in our various laws, and make sure that we don't have these informal under the table dealings and backroom dealings to run these important parts of our country, and more specifically for Tobago?
Certainly, I think one of the things we recognized coming into this was that the idea of PNM in Tobago having PNM in Trinidad being their big brother. A lot of the responsibility that should have happened in Tobago was not taking place. Probably because they honestly didn't have to, because there really was a big brother in Trinidad taking care of it for you. But that goes against our wish for autonomy. If we're saying we want to be autonomous, if we're saying we want to have control of these things, we need to show that we are able to take control of these things. So many of the conversations we have had over the last 6 months or so, the entities, for example, Caribbean Airlines and others, they have actually said to us, this is the first time we're having this kind of conversation with anybody in the Tobago House of Assembly. That has shocked us. That shocked us because we thought that the conversations were happening, and we thought that, something else was happening in the background, only to realize that it was really on our part in the Tobago House of Assembly where we were not taking up our responsibility. And because we have recognized that, we are saying, hey, if we are saying we want to be autonomous, we have to show that we are big boys and we are big girls and we are willing to do the work. So yes, when we recognize that it only cost about $5 million or so, a little over $5 million, to keep our airports open a little later so that we can have the flights coming in. When we recognize that we are in, June, and when you look at Caribbean Airlines' schedule for the next couple months, all of the tickets are already sold. Mm-hmm. Half of the people who need to come to Tobago have not even gotten a chance to purchase a ticket. We have to take a responsible thing and do what we need to do to get people on the island, because as you know, our domestic tourism, or tourism generally, is where we need, what we are trying to bulk up. So we have to do what we have to do. We are willing to realign. We are willing to look at the monies that we are spending on airlines in different places, looking at the data. How many people are those airlines really bringing in? If we pay this airline $20 million or $30 million for the year, are we really getting maximum benefit out of that? Or is it worth taking a $5 million from this particular airline, renegotiating, putting it into this so that we have more people coming on the island? Those are the kinds of conversations we've been having for the last 6 months. And that is why the Chief Secretary and Secretary for Finance could have said very clearly, we are willing to foot this bill because it's not a large bill and the benefit will outweigh the cost in the long run. So yes, it's all part of our push for economy, but our push for autonomy, but it is also showing that because we do not, as in the Progressive Democratic Patriots, we do not have a big brother or big sister anywhere looking out for us. We have to make the tough decisions for ourselves, and we are willing to do that.
Kemi, bringing you into the conversation now, there are many talking points from yesterday's budget presentation, but as Dr. Faith B. Israel just mentioned, they have to make the tough decisions because there's no big brother as such as what we've seen 20 years previously. I know that we had some conversations yesterday. I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add or put forward to Dr. B. Israel.
Sure. So, Dr. B as well, the PDP prides itself in being a party on the ground. In fact, you all would have won the election on that. Do you think that the budget that was presented by the Chief Secretary yesterday really and truly reflects the views of the people on the ground and what the people of Tobago actually want for the island?
It certainly does, because I am not sure if you guys are aware, but for the period leading up to the budget, we've actually had several consultations on the ground about it. So the Chief Sec was talking to farmers and fishermen. The Chief Sec was talking to individuals who are, some of the lowest wage earners, the CPEP workers and URP workers and so forth. The Chief Sec has been having conversations with these individuals. That is why, for example, we've made some of the tough decisions. So even though in Trinidad, the CPO and you all with the government there and the unions there talking about only 2%, only 3%, only 4%, we have made a decision in Tobago to raise the salaries of some of our, the URP workers and some of our agri workers and so forth, because this is something that they have said to us, only we can't live on this amount of money every month. We absolutely cannot do it. And this budget takes into consideration their wants and their needs. We also recognize that if we bring more economic activities to the island generally, everyone benefits. So that is why, for example, we would be willing to spend the $5 million to bring more Caribbean airline flights, because we know bringing more people means that the guy who's selling pie on the street would make more money, the taxi driver would make more money, the shop would make more money, the bed and breakfast would make more money. Everybody collectively makes more money if we do that. So yes, it does represent the man on the ground, and you would hear the spokespersons for different groups are already saying, wow, we've never been recognized before. That was an amazing thing. It was the one sentence that said, yes, we will talk to, we will deal with, we will interact with, and they are really happy about that. So certainly it is a budget for the man on the ground.
Well, we've heard a fair response from the Tobago Chamber. I know that my colleague Annie Johnson this morning had Diane Haddad on the program, but we've also heard from other members of the Tobago Chamber. They said they're happy. Speaking about recognition was the fact that the Chief Secretary intends to establish the Tobago Development Bank, pump $60 million into it for businesses to recover from COVID-19. That's one aspect of development and recovery. The other aspect is foreign direct investments, because he mentioned a three-part plan, which included the amendment or lobbying for the amendment of the Foreign Investment Act, as well as re-establishing the current land licensing regime. Foreign direct investment, you all are targeting this. Perhaps this is a lesson that we can take from you, because you're not only looking at the oil and gas around the water of Tobago's, which you all have said you all will be willing to go back to the negotiating table for the Minister of Finance to ensure that no longer could they state Tobago's contribution or undermine Tobago's contribution, you know, I say. So foreign direct investments, again, a big part of this budget.
It is a big part of the budget, and what we've recognized is that there are quite a number of actual Tobagonians, for example, who live outside of Trinidad and Tobago, who've done a pretty good job for themselves wherever they are, and they want to come back home. They want to invest. They want to be a part of developing, but they've never been given an opportunity to do so. So yesterday, for example, following the discussion about having our medical facilities incorporate teaching activities and so forth, one of our prominent nursing individuals who lives outside, I saw a post from her. Yes, thank you. I want to come home and contribute to teaching in the medical field, because that is what I've wanted to do all of my life. The same thing applies to individuals in different spheres. So we recognize that we do need people to come. We do need people to come with their finances. We will make arrangements, for example, if we need to give land or give access to land so that they can build homes, or so that they can build companies or factories. Of course, the caveat being you need to then be able to hire people, train people locally, so that we all benefit on the ground. Those are the discussions that we need to have, and those are the actual actions that we will do within the next couple of years. Of course, it's important to note that what we've presented yesterday, all of it will not happen during fiscal 2023. It's impossible for all of that to happen in 1 year. But one of the things that I know that my Chief Secretary for Finance has been pounding up with us, we need to start. We need to start. And once we start, the ball gets rolling and we can continue. What we've recognized that has happened over the last 20 or so years is that there are projects that have been on the books in Tobago forever. They never got started. And because they never got started, they've been on the books for 20 years. We are not going to do that. We are going to start it, and starting it forces us to continue doing them and continue producing, continue being productive on the island, and that's what we have to do, including getting people to come back or just sending back their finances to help us develop.
Well, Dr. Israel, that leads me to a slight concern I have, and it'll be very tricky to voice it without sounding perhaps maybe that I'm bashing Tobago, and I don't mean, if it comes across that way, it's not what I mean. But foreign direct investment. Now, obviously, you've referenced the diaspora coming back home, trying to get opportunities, because I understand we're a small island nation, twin island nation. There's only so many opportunities in so many fields and industries here as opposed to the rest of the world. So trying to bring that back in and generating those opportunities, that would be a major help, not just to get those individuals coming home, but also for future generations. However, part of foreign direct investment, obviously you would like to think of it as foreign capital coming in for various industries just in general, not just from the diaspora. Now, I understand, because I don't think it's limited to Tobago. I think both in Trinidad and Tobago, there's always some wariness with foreign ownership and foreign influence. There always will be. Now, with regards to Tobago, there might be some very low-hanging fruit examples that older people might be aware about. But generally speaking, is this initiative looking to target a lot of foreign capital if possible? Because even in the crisis that we're in now, there's still opportunity and there's still people looking to invest in new projects and have new opportunities to find them. And Tobago is an untouched land where there could be plenty new opportunities. Is Tobago ready for potentially, yes, foreign capital, but also what comes with that, foreign ownership and foreign influence? Because, I mean, like I said, both islands tend to be a bit wary at times.
And I think one of the things that Tobagonians have shown is that we are very willing to have the difficult conversations, and we're very willing to say no. I mean, I'm sure you've recognized that over the last couple of years, particularly with the PDP leadership, that we are very willing to say no if we realize that, because we know all money ain't good money. We know that. And even if you look at the example with the hotel Marriott, what we've done, the conversations we've had with Marriott over the last 6 months, Marriott has actually said to us, we've never had this conversation with the Tobago House of Assembly. We were having these conversations with the big brothers in Trinidad. And what we have said to them very clearly is, okay, so you are now having the conversation with the Tobago House of Assembly. Yes, you are bringing in your money. Yes, you are bringing in your investment. But these are the concerns. These are the concerns for the fishermen in the area. These are the concerns for the environmentalists who knows that we have hidden treasures in the ocean right next to where you want to build. These are the concerns. So you go back, now that you've heard the concerns, you go back, bring us your designs that incorporate all of these concerns, and we will go from there. Now, what we know in the Tobago House of Assembly, if those designs do not match up with what the concerns are for our fishermen and our environmentalists and so forth, we are very willing to say thanks, but no thanks, Marriott, because that is what we are willing to do. That is why we've been elected. That's why we've been placed here. And I think we've done it enough so that people recognize that if you're coming and you're coming, you have to come good, or we are not going to be the ones that are bought because you dangle money in front of us. We are willing to give up our patronage or give up our property or give up all of those things. No. The PDP has stated very clearly that any investment that happens in Tobago needs to benefit Tobagonians, and we are willing to make the tough decisions, even if it means saying no thank you to an investment opportunity.
Dr. B. Israel, I know that we've agreed time is very short, so I want to thank you. It's 8:31, Thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate your presence, and we hope to continue the conversation next week. But for now, this is where we'll have to end it.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I didn't even realize the time had gone so quickly, but thanks for the reminder because I need to be somewhere else shortly. Have a great day, guys.
Have a great day, Dr.
Good morning, Dr.
Bisrael. And a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Kedmiel, bringing you back into the conversation. Like I said, very many talking points in relation to the Tobago budget presentation being 3.5 hours long. But I must wonder if the minister, well, first of all, the negotiations between the Chief Secretary, who is also the Secretary for Finance and the Economy in Tobago, as well as Minister of Finance for the National Economy, Colum Imbert. Wonder what negotiations like that will be. But at the same time, if they're not given the full 6.9% of the allocation, their estimated allocation in the budget to be read in October, how does this play out with the plans that the PDP have for Tobago?
Well, that's really the thing right about it. And I mean, the Chief Secretary, Mr. Augustine, has said early on from as early as December when they were elected that they intend to lobby very hard on the part of for Tobago, not just for autonomy, but also in the area of finance and how much money they can really receive. And so they have gone ahead with a very, very ambitious budget for 2023, and so it's some $3.97 billion. So it's interesting to see how the negotiations will go between them, considering that we are expecting to see budget sometime in the near future, probably in about 4 months, just under 4 months or so.
Because the other aspect of it as well is the oil and gas sharing agreement. Tobago is now fighting for its fair share, stating that with the recent discoveries of energy of the waters of Tobago, you have to wonder now what that means in the diplomatic sense, because Trinidad and Tobago is one nation, two islands. How is that going to play out, especially in terms of how do we define what Tobago's waters are as compared to what Trinidad's waters are, given how close the islands are? So again, it's all going to be very interesting. I think the mere fact is they're not lobbying for separation.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not lobbying for a
That's
separation.
already been cleared up as already been cleared.
But there's still a lot of questions with regards to the practical implementation of what autonomy will eventually mean. Now, one of the things I found interesting, that obviously we ran out of time, that we didn't get a chance to speak to Dr. Bisrael, I think the implication is the THA under the PNM, or at least the last administration, didn't really operate independent enough to even warrant their existence. That's the implication. And I do wonder if it could be that, as she said, it seems as though they were fine letting central government do the work. Why should we bother doing the work? Let's just sit pretty on in the assembly and get elected and be happy with whatever career that comes out of that. But I do wonder, though, with regards to autonomy, they're doing a lot of work now. They're looking at the resources in these gas fields or oil fields. If we base the budget allocations on those, first of all, are we just saying, okay, revenue that comes out of fields in Tobago goes to Tobago? What if that's not enough? What if that's more than enough? What happens when that runs out? Then what do we do with the budget? And I think this is why...
That's where the debate comes in.
Right.
With the negotiation,
the PDP, I'm making an assumption here. They're smart in that we don't just have to worry about the energy reserves now, but the national budget moving forward. And the precedent that they set in autonomy will have implications down the line that they do have to be careful about.
And Kedmiel, overall, as I stated, it's not a push for separation, it's a push for autonomy. But Mr. Chavez Augustine did state that, he compared Tobago to Scotland and Trinidad, of course, to England in his presentation yesterday. But we're seeing now what that is leading to in terms of the fight for independence in Scotland. So all of that was mentioned in the budget yesterday, and I'm wondering if this is really the start. Because again, stressing no separation but autonomy, but if this is the start of a very tricky road and tricky relationship with Tobago Head, it's already difficult as is, but this is just pushing the flames even further.
Well, I mean, that's it. And as I said, and as I was saying earlier, the PDP and the Chief Secretary and also the Deputy Chief Secretary they have been very, very clear and point and deliberate in terms of in terms of what they are saying, in terms of what they would like to see for Tobago and how they would like to go forward. And I do believe that they do have the support of the people of Tobago, because we saw basically resounding win for them back in 2021. And so the people give them a mandate, and so they are only now moving forward on the mandate. So I don't fault them at all. What I expect is that they work hand in hand with Trinidad and Tobago and Trinidad works hand in hand with Tobago, because they would have done it with the old THA, but now they can very well do it with the PDP.
And we have seen, at least we didn't get a chance to ask her this time, but in the past, every time we've asked her, they have had no issues with communication and working and having dialogue with central government. So that's always a good sign. We'll wait and see.
Well, with no immediate criticisms to the budget estimates as presented yesterday by Mr. Foley Augustine, apart from the maths is not matching. That's according to Mr. Kelvin Morris, who is the minority within the THA. The maths not matching, but he will give his response next week. We will bring you the latest in relations to the budget presentation in Tobago. But for now, we have to take a break on the program, because when we return, we focus on the national economy as a whole and exactly how global inflation is affecting Trinidad and Tobago. And well, the Minister of Trade and Industry had a lot to say. So we return after this.
People of Blanchisseuse and environs, something big is coming your way. Be part of the initial membership drive for the establishment of the North Coast Credit Union Cooperative Society Limited this Sunday, 26th June at 2 p.m. sharp at the Blanchisseuse Community Center. Walk with $100 and your ID card. For more information, call 783-1971. Tell a friend, arrive early and walk with your Blue Note and ID card.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we see you next time.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andrew.
It may seem like the hardest thing to do right now, but we all need each other to wear a mask, wash our hands, watch our physical distance, and stay at home. We need you safe. Together we can make the difference. Together we can curb the spread of COVID-19. So let's be responsible in our actions. The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
The increase in the price of flour announced by the NFM, as also the other producer, is a direct result of supply chain disruptions created by the COVID-19 pandemic, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, increased price of freight and shipping rates, adverse weather conditions, and export restrictions by several producing countries. Let me say that the price of wheat is not within our control and is symptomatic of the ongoing global food crisis. It should be noted that there are no duties, there are no taxes attached to wheat imports. And this government has also been proactive during fiscal 2022 to the zero rating of basic food items and the suspension of the CET on basic food items. Let me also say that this is a temporary situation and that both local producers have already given a commitment to adjust prices downward in line with future market conditions. Most of the countries in CARICOM have increased the price of flour at least once this year. However, even with this increase, it is to be noted that flour in Trinidad and Tobago will still be on an average of 19% cheaper than in other CARICOM countries. Let us admit that this is not a simple solution. This is in fact quite complex, but government wishes to give the assurance to the population. It is not expected that this will result in a similar type increase in the cost of the finished items. It is also expected that retailers will seek to control their markups having regard to the current situation. But I give the assurance to the population that government is actively looking at solutions in support of the poor and vulnerable in this particular circumstance.
Well, that was Minister of Trade and Industry Paula Gobiscoon, I believe, in the Senate before yesterday's post-cabinet briefing, where she was trying to answer questions with regards to concerns, valid concerns, concerns that the government has stated that they share with regards to rising food prices. Because ultimately speaking, this is not the first time that prices have risen, I believe, this year, and within the last couple of years, this is not the first economic... this is not the first economic shock that we have received. So I think the problem is there are a lot of complexities around the situation. So it's difficult to give a fair assessment because you have to know really and truly what could the government do and what they can't do to then say, well, what they're doing is adequate or inadequate. And I mean, we at the post-cabinet briefing, the more depth went into this particular topic by Minister Gobiscoon. And I do believe, just before we get to that clip, there are times when I feel as though, as opposed to other ministers, she seems to have a better handle on things with regards to her portfolio. Now, the question is, does the country really trust what she has to say? Because she hasn't really been in the forefront before. But now that this part of the government has now come to the forefront, and she's now to the forefront, despite all of the issues that we have in government, will we be willing to hear what she has to say and accept what she has to say?
Well, if I may just say, I add to what you're suggesting in terms that the minister has been fairly well composed. However, it's very difficult to trust what she says, simply because whilst I agree and understand that it is out of her hands in relation to at least its imported inflation, right? This is not something that we necessarily control. It's imported. Flour is still subsidized. Wheat products are still subsidized. There's no actual taxation on it when it arrives to Trinidad. The issue for me is stating things like, we are proactively monitoring the situation. When asked about what the solutions are 2 days ago, in the Senate, when asked what the solutions are being put forward by the government, you relate everything from last year's budget that was read by the Minister of Finance as the solutions after proactively measuring. I mean, we've already had a mid-year budget review. So it's very hard to believe that you've been proactively monitoring the situation because you have not been able to adapt to times. You have not been able to actually go beyond last year's budget, which makes me wonder, are you forward thinking? It's no surprise to me about the prices, huh? What's a surprise to me is the fact that you make these comments, which is totally out of touch with the common man on the street.
So I think, and let me hear what you have to say with regards to some of what she had to say at the post-cabinet briefing, because I do wonder if it was really just cabinet felt they needed to say something now and they weren't necessarily ready to say what they needed the people to hear, and all she had was to just trot out the old stuff. Then cabinet had their meeting, their weekly meeting, and after the meeting, perhaps what she had to say, well, had a little bit more substance. So we have a clip of what Minister of Trade and Industry, Paul Ogbuepi-Skun, had to say, as well as there was some weighing in by Minister Stuart Young as well, because he was at the press conference. Let's take a look at that post-cabinet clip.
We are reviewing what's possible, but there are some difficulties with that. So we've done yes, there's no VAT, yes, there's no duty on the imports of these ingredients, the wheat and so on. However, we have to remember in coming up with the solutions, there are some complexities in that government is a 51% shareholder in the NFM, and we may consider perhaps should be subsidized. However, it's not a quick, so we can't easily run to that because there's a situation of the private producer. And the question must always be, can we utilize taxpayers' monies to support private business? So those are the kinds of complexities and the difficult situation that we're in. And of course, one will always also consider if you're going to subsidize flour, we look at that, for instance, you have to look at the other basic foods that have been going up. Both producers will be guided by the price of these products. They've booked their supply of wheat until the end of 2022. And so that they know the price that they're doing that at. And of course, they would need to get the necessary foreign exchange and all those considerations. So I think pretty much we can say, unless of course there's some intervention by the provider of wheat to them. But if it is that they have gone through the process of forward buying, I would see that there's some certainty that they would be able to secure at the prices that they've engaged contractually at. I'm thinking that it's a contractual engagement, and therefore those are the prices that they will be stuck with.
Is to put it in context of what is going on globally. Yeah? So when you look at what has been going on globally, so for example, at the Summit of the Americas, one of the big topics of conversation was food security. This is certainly not a Trinidad and Tobago issue. You look at all of the countries in the world right now, it is taking place. And when you look at what is going on in the United Kingdom, there were actually recent protest actions at rising food prices. President Biden, right there at the Summit of the Americas, the biggest question he was answering domestically was inflation and these types of things. So we will do what we can here, as you've heard both ministers talk about. There are certain personal decisions we can take. We are not at all comfortable at what is going on.
Government doesn't do price controls. We haven't been doing it. I tell you, since I'm in this government, since close to 7 years now, we have not. But we don't engage in price controls. That's the thing of the past. However, it's an imperative on my part at this time to really make an appeal to the retailers, the shopkeepers, the supermarkets, groceries, bakers, corner stores, really to do their part as well and be reasonable. The truth is, we all have to do our part. Government, retailers and business people, and also the consumers, right? I have heard in recent times some retailers have been having like 40 to 60% markups on some staple products. That can't be right. And already, Consumer Affairs is already noticing very large variances in the increase in price of flour. We are noticing it already. I can tell you who they are, but I'm not yet ready to name and shame. But there are those who are holding stock of the item which they bought at a particular price, and they've already gone up. I'm going to ensure that the Consumer Affairs Division reports on flour in particular, let's see, in another few days by the end of the month, exactly who's selling what, so that consumers could be guided by where they ought to make their purchases. I do make a strong appeal to the retailers, in particular, the 40 and 60% markups generally that we're seeing on very basic items, unacceptable. unacceptable because there are supermarkets that are retailing, that are doing markups at 25%, I know, on basic items, and sometimes lower. So we ask them not to be unconscionable. This is a time of crisis in terms of food security for the world.
And that leads us to the question of the day. The minister was complaining about high markups, the potential that it is essentially price gouging. So we want to find out from you, the viewer, your opinions. Do you think that businesses might revert to old prices when inflation subsides? Do you think that might happen, or do you think they will remain high and potentially remain profitable? And there was more said at the post-cabinet press briefing. The Minister of Communications and Minister Gopi Skoon spoke at length about alternatives like cassava flour. One of the issues that the Minister Gopi Skoon said with local alternatives, and I think you could argue with local agriculture in general, would be economies of scale. At least right now, the economies of scale makes the price difference very, very prohibitive. Essentially, what we produce locally might end up being too expensive, and we have to potentially maybe put more investment and effort to get economies of scale so that we actually don't just go from one high-price food source to another high-price food source.
Now, the other aspect of it is in relation to price gouging that she would have mentioned. Private businesses here in Trinidad is happening. And she was very stern. She says, I have a list of names, but I'm not going to reveal that as yet. You know, we will have discussions, and in a couple of weeks, if I need to name it, we'll name it, right? Which total nonsense, in my opinion. Because you have the Division of Consumer Affairs, which, again, has been monitoring the situation. But what are you all doing about it? The response in relation to what you're doing about it, you're saying that the government, there's very little that the government can do to ignore the call, and she said that they will monitor prices on supermarket shelves if price gouging continues.
Think about what she's saying.
Go on and I'll finish.
Right, because essentially, depending on how large the various organizations that are the main culprits here, you're basically looking, at the end of the day, potentially, at the finances of the various political parties.
Well, that was what I was alluding to, so fine.
Right?
But
also, even if they're not financiers and it's not political pressure, you're also probably looking at some of the employers, the larger employers or the largest employers of the country. So even if they had no political financing, politically speaking, you know, the President of the United States can't just go to the big car manufacturers and piss them off whenever he feels like it. Waves
Sean,
could be made.
You cannot come to the public and state that you have been proactively monitoring the situation, and that, well, there's very little that we can do about it now. But we will continue to monitor the situation.
I think the problem is a lot of countries in the world, including ours, are essentially caught with no more levers to pull. Because she pointed it out, well, things are exempt from VAT. Like, basic necessities are already exempt. You can't exempt rice from VAT twice. You can't exempt flour and potatoes from VAT twice, or chickens, right? If you exempt too many things off of VAT, then you now run into the problem of reducing government revenue, and then you run into the problem of your transfers and subsidies that people don't want to get rid of.
So, continuing, she says, I don't think it might be necessary to implement price controls. I mean, you all have implemented price controls.
No, she said they don't, or they're not.
In various forms. Price controls don't necessarily mean price ceilings and price floorings. There are other ways that you implement pricing control as well. But you said that we will continue to use influence and, of course, continue to have discussions. I'm sorry, I have no confidence in that. Is this the same influence you're referring to a certain boat party that took place on Boxing Day last year? Is that the same influence that you're talking about? Because I have absolutely no confidence in what you're stating.
I actually wanted to state that I am not looking to have the mother pay for the sins of the son, except to the fact that the case itself and the court proceedings seem to be very going ahead in a very...
Before we get lost with that.
Yeah, right? But with that said, the problem is, I rarely think that, to some extent, my issue is with regards to agriculture.
Before we go on to that...
we did not start, and it's similar to what Dr. Basril said. We never start, so it's on the books. We always say it.
Before we get to that, yes, because you're pushing cassava flour now and
well, you mention it, and you mention the fact that economies of scale is not there. Well, it's not there because we haven't invested enough potentially in it.
So you've gone on to say, this is the part that really gets to me, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to your Minister of Trade and Industry talk. She says, at this stage, we realize that we have to try and assist, especially with this very basic item. At this stage, a couple of days ago, you said you were proactively monitoring the situation, and you have been doing so for a while. Now you're stating that at this stage, we realize we have to assist. So don't worry, in 2 weeks' time, we'll come forward with solutions. 2 days ago, you read to me the tenets of Budget 2022. That's what you read to me a couple of years. We had a mid-year budget review. You're coming and you're saying you're committed to agriculture. And then all of this nonsense that you're feeding us, you could speak your thesis, your master's thesis in Senate or at a post-cabinet media briefing. That's what we saw basically in her response in relation to the definition of inflation and what we've seen. This is nonsense because it does not address the issues of the common man on the street. And that is what you all are forgetting, because at the end of the day, you could still order carry out whenever you want.
So what I feel is, well, there's an interesting point that you're alluding to there that I thought of, and I believe politicians, generally speaking, only know what's going on in two small sections of the country, and that is the extremes. They know what's going on with the very poor, because that's the people who they try to play to the camera for, and they consult with. You know, we're trying to protect the most vulnerable. So, of course, they have to look into that, right? But also, their lifestyles are generally much higher than the average middle-class household, so they will know about that type of lifestyle. So to the people stuck in the middle, the poor but not too poor, the rich but really not that rich, the people in the middle of the middle class, I don't think politicians really are aware of what it is a significant chunk of the population, right, in between those extremes are going through. Now, with regards to her messaging, I'm reading it different to you. I don't think that it's adequate. I think, however, the real culprit here is how government handles its business on a whole. Because at the end of the day, she is not in charge of the money. And she is but one minister. And we know that there is one man who is in charge of the money. Now, juxtapose that with the fact that, yes, resources are limited and it's not endless. However, I think really and truly, the issue is, it took until Thursday after the cabinet meeting for it to have anything substantial to say that wasn't a rehash of the previous budget presentation and historical things that...
Sure, and it's taking another 2 weeks.
Right? No, but my point is, at the very least, it took her for the cabinet meeting. Let me put it this way. People are suffering. They could have, I don't know, maybe had a quick session, an emergency session, schedule something to happen a little bit sooner so that she doesn't go there and basically say, well, we did all these things last year. That's fine, but what happened last year is not really adding or helping with a new problem this week.
Just before we break for news on the hour, it's clear to me that, I have respect for you, Minister. I have respect for all ministers, and I will say that you have been very composed. You haven't been argumentative, nor have you really, in relation to response to opposition questions in the Senate, have you taken any stabs, if you get what I'm saying. However, unfortunately, it seems as though you and the rest of your colleagues are absolutely short-sighted. Proactive measures, really, I don't understand. Where were you, Minister? And sorry, Sean, I have to cut you because you had to go to news, but where were you, Minister, when the Minister of Finance raised taxes once and said, they haven't rioted as yet, so I'm thinking about raising it again? Where were you when that happened? And now you're saying, oh, well, we have to do something about this situation. What are you going to say next? You're going to hold a post-cabinet media briefing next week and say, let them eat cake? We break for news on the hour, ladies and gentlemen.
People of Blanchisseuse and environs, something big is coming your way. Be part of the initial membership drive for the establishment of the North Coast Credit Union Cooperative Society Limited this Sunday, 26th June at 2 p.m. sharp at the Blanchisseuse Community Center. Walk with $100 and your ID card. For more information, call 783-1971. tell a friend. Arrive early and walk with your Blue Note and ID card.
Seven is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
The Mary Immaculate Prayer Group and Friends presents its prayer breakfast on August 31st in aid of Monsignor Christian Pereira. The prayer breakfast begins from 9 a.m. at the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception. Cost is only $200. Come support the Cup of Gratitude in aid of Monsignor Pereira, August 31st.
Tickets are available at the parish office of the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception and the parish of Our Lady of Perpetual Help.
Within the past few days, I've received the resignation of Mr. Justice Dennis Morrison for personal reasons, and we can't expand. He didn't expand on the personal reasons. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Justice Dennis Morrison for agreeing initially to undertake the task. As you all are aware, he came, he was sworn in, he met with council to commission. A lot of work has been going on between the two commissioners and Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maraj and his team, the setting up of the secretariat for the commission. All of that has been taking place. I'm pleased to say that Cabinet has today immediately approved and confirmed a replacement for Mr. Justice Dennis Morrison, and that replacement, who came very highly recommended, is a Mr. Jerome Lynch, Queen's Counsel. Of course, you all would recall at the outset, shortly after this tragic incident, the government had announced that we would have had statutory inquiry coming out of the Ministry of Energy. There was a lot of uproar from the opposition at that time. That would have been long completed because the time frame for that would have been 45 days. We did caution at the time with a commission of inquiry. It is outside of the government's control. There must be an independent commission of inquiry. We are not the ones setting their timetable, setting the time frame. They are the ones who have done so. I'm assured that they will continue to try to keep to the procedural hearings in August, and in short time frame I expect Mr. Lynch, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, and the second commissioner, Mr. Wilson, to be able to talk to the population and say what is their intention in keeping this timetable.
Well, that is the Minister of Energy's primary contribution for yesterday's post-cabinet prep briefing, to basically inform the country of what's going on with regards to the resignation of one of the members of the Commission of Inquiry. However, I think the most important thing of what he said was the fact that, well, the commission has to be independent, and they set the date to start in August. And then he threw in a job, a not-so-subtle job, to those who basically wanted this independent commission, saying, well, the government would have had it settled in 45 days. I don't know if I necessarily believe it would have happened in 45 days, but I think it's reasonable to say that potentially we would have gotten a answer, maybe not the answer, but we would have gotten a answer sooner than this.
Sometimes I feel sorry for Stuart Young, because he's a brilliant gentleman who just chose the wrong group of friends to hang out with. But essentially, you're stating that a few days ago, Sir Dennis Morris resigned. You waited until you got a replacement announced. Fine, fair enough. We don't know what the reasons are. However, you're stating that a lot of work has been going on behind closed doors. A lot of work has been going on. I feel sorry for these families. March 10th, this commission of inquiry was stated. It's going to now start in August. A lot of work has been happening behind closed doors. I feel so sorry for them. Minister Stuart Young, update us on what work has been going on, please. Brilliant man, wrong group of friends.
I mean, in theory, it's not up to him with regards to the commission. In theory.
In theory.
Right, but with that
Remind
said,
him of the question of the day.
Do you believe, question of the day, do you believe businesses will revert to old prices when inflation subsides? The phone lines have been already open because somebody has called in early. We have Diego Martin on the line. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Shah and Mr. Small.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know what is a DOA? Dead on arrival. The Pariah Commission of Inquiry. That is the way I feel about it. He said the new QC Lynch come with good recommendation. I would like to know who gave that. They have to be transparent because it looks like this is designed to fail. Now, why are we in this state at this point in time? We have a rudderless government. Where is the leader? The AGS fell apart. The Minister of Youth and Development, Foster, has brought something we should not be even telling our students and kids to do. So that is why we are. So Bharat Jagde was right. He's seeing from outside, and some of these ministers, including the leader, should pull himself and have a bird's eye view of where the country going. And for Gopi Singh to now come and say in 2 weeks' time, I mean to say, you know it coming. All you know chickenpox is coming. All you know the virus is coming. We still ended up with 4,000 deaths. No, the critical thing I want to come back to is
very quickly, caller, because we have other callers. Go ahead.
Okay, all right.
No, go ahead, make your point.
All right, quickly, the affidavits.
Yeah.
When the Sacharma case fell apart, Sherman McNichols
Yes.
did not want to be cross-examined on his written statement with a tantamount to an affidavit. So his case collapsed when they wanted. So this is a similar thing. A flawed, you could put it left, right, center, look upside down, is a flawed AD. If this failed and this case is thrown, will somebody go after the current AG for misbehavior in public office? Knowing you are senior counsel and is putting a flawed people, we have to fix the judiciary, we have to fix the police, and we have to fix the country. So nobody's above the law.
Yes.
So if you do something deliberate, you made a mistake, consequences come after. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you very
caller.
much.
I do wonder if one of the reasons why the government was so slow to respond to the food inflation problem was because they were so caught up with all the other controversies that actually are a result of
Which is
their
why you
own
have
behavior.
ministers for separate reasons. You have various
Yeah,
ministers.
but we don't have ministers with independent capacity.
Before we go to our next caller, I just think, I don't know if it's just only the parliament or the whole of TNT should take a Dulcolax or a Zental for obvious reasons. Maybe parliament needs to take a Dulcolax or a Zental, to clear out what's clogging it. Anyway, we have a caller on the line with us from Arima. Good morning, caller.
Morning, brothers. This is Bali Maharaj. Good morning to you.
Good
and
morning,
your
Mr. Maraj.
Morning, sir. Morning.
Give all you a little 1 month off. Quick one. I know you. 1 minute. I want the public to know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, last night you opened 3 problems, which is Costa, AG, and food.
Yes.
Let me tell you one time at the whole of Trinidad and Tobago, from 60 years ago. You see them 2 things on top? If you go back to the AG and he business, the 2 people they fighting was here almost 80 years already. And they're millions of dollars wait for 20 years. It value more than that, so don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
I am asking the people of this country, concentrate on food now, brother. You have product changes, the climate change. After that, you hit them with a COVID. When COVID, less labor, no food, it dropped to 50-60%. Bam, war. Gone down again. The world food is in trouble. No. I want to always have a piece of my personal thing. I don't talk to make government look bad or opposition, but I want to make it clear to all my political friends. What we are doing here, our brothers and sisters, we don't go, I must go through this list with you fellas again. I want the fellas in Trinidad to go. We can't go sugar. We used to do 90% rice, it's hardly 1%. Wheat is out of the question. Corn is out of the question. Wheat, corn, and peas and beans. I could rice, potato, onion, and I will just talk dairy products and meat. That's about 10. I could call that next 10 or 100. Who can we go them thing? The answer is no. What can we do, brothers and sisters of this country, is to really we bring in on fries. $1 billion in fries a year.
Yeah.
They charge 5%. I see they put in 60% now on macaroni company country. 30% on because Jamaica started produce some milk. They can't produce all, So when you add let me tell you how it works. I will take my time and do it. I ain't going. So when freight is 20% for the value, and the cost of the cargo is like $40,000. They hit your tax VAT on the $40,000.
Yeah.
Mexico stopped charging duty on all the basic food items. Now, as the minister said, that don't have the markup for the wholesale and the retailer. So where you see flour going to buy 3%. When the wholesalers put a little markup and they think, look out for 50% more flour going to buy.
Mr.
So I
Mariam,
want to take up tomorrow. I want some of you all to respond to me. I could take up the phone, but I can't go on and talk everything. The basic thing, this taxes and this government, they have to change.
Yeah.
They cannot charge tax on freight. again, they have to suspend it if they want to take it on. Ladies, I want them to know this. I write in a letter to them. I spoke to the minister. She said, Bali, send it for her. And I want the country to know the whole system in this country have to change from 60 years ago to what we really meet today. We never meet a war.
Yeah.
We never meet COVID.
Mr. Miraj, I'm gonna have to. We'll have to continue conversation off air. We'll have to call you and continue it off air. But we have to keep the phone lines open because we have other callers.
We have a caller waiting.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, sir.
But thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you very much
Good
for
hearing
calling
from you
in.
again.
And I get his point. Import duties, that is something for food that perhaps, I don't know why the minister, maybe they're reluctant to touch it, but that is something we should look at.
We will get in contact with you, Mr. Miraj, to continue the conversation.
That is something the government should look at. Let me be more specific.
We have a caller on the line with us from Chagonis. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, morning.
I must say I was surprised at your guest's response to charging people for malfeasance in public office. When he said it was inadequate, maybe evidence showed just the opposite. In fact, he quoted the case with Malcolm Jones, which I assume by now Sean will realize the real cause for the shutdown of the refinery, because he gave that evidence yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And when the succeeding government put Malcolm Jones before the court, from the time government changed, his party come back and withdraw the case. And that is the problem with our laws in Trinidad, because he went on afterwards to say, we have not kept our laws up to date. We have. The problem is we have sabotaged it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The previous methodology is when you're thinking about changing a law, the public service would come up with a draft, people will see it. And you know how long I have been trying to find out what went wrong with the property tax law.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who was the minister himself have done this program and will not respond to my questions. And lastly, we heard the THA and the budget yesterday, and you asked them some questions that, as far as I'm concerned, totally irrelevant. And the proper ones you did not ask. Because one of the points made that they couldn't see how the Minister of Finance could sit down in Trinidad and make decisions in finance for Tobago.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they didn't see anything wrong when at Tobagonian Mr. Robinson was Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and whatnot, and he was making decisions for Trinidad. And we talk about sharing oil revenue. Tobago, with 5% of the population, is getting 7% of gross revenue just in the THA. That is beside other revenues that go to Tobago. And now you want a portion of oil revenue on top of that. So how much is 5% of the population going to get there?
Professor, I do believe that if they get oil revenue, that would replace the budget allocation, right? But the reason why they're looking for oil revenue is because they expect it to be more than the average. Well, this is not what we spoke about this morning, but generally the talks
the speech itself.
with autonomy. And I do think the example of Robinson as PM is not necessarily the same thing.
No, he was Minister of Finance.
All right.
Yeah, but that's still central government.
All right.
That's still central. He has a central government position.
Professor,
as opposed
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
So our Minister of Finance now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor. Sean will respond to you because we have other callers.
Yeah, I have to be quick. We have a caller waiting. It's just, we're talking about central government controlling Tobago as opposed to a member of central government from Tobago running the whole country. That is two different things.
Remember, the PDP of now was not around the time when Robinson was there. And the questions that we asked this morning are relevant, but maybe they're not important to you, but they are relevant for the entire conversation.
Well, because
but thank you very much for your observations.
Of what we've seen recently in Tobago. Recently.
We have a caller on the line with us from Dabity. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
This is your neophyte from Dabity, and I am almost fully in agreement with the professor's contribution, although he didn't have sufficient time to really go into much detail on it. And the analogy he brought with Mr. Robinson, we think that should be taken in essence incomparable to Fally Augustine, and you're looking at central versus local government election. And one of my first points on that is that Sandy Grande Regional Corporation is dying for funding when Tobago is just having a lavish budget without consideration. So we are all residents of this twin island, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
Although we are governed under different laws via the Local Government Act plus the THA Act, and we know that there are differences there. But I just want to say 2 points I want to raise with respect to that. Dr. Faith B. Israel this morning spoke about, you all mentioned coming out of the budget, foreign direct investment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absurd that she as somebody to bring an example of foreign direct investment of a nurse who wants to come back home here to work. And you all accepted that. I mean, I know normally you all are on point with these things, but that is the most ridiculous example I've heard in a long time. That nurse wants to come back home to resettle and make whatever money she can make. She's not bringing back any money to Trinidad and Tobago as foreign direct investment.
I think she meant it from the context, caller.
My last point, if you'd allow me, just
You
one
go ahead,
more minute.
go ahead.
The feedback from the Minister of Trade. You all know that inflation is really something that is global.
Yes.
Our dollar is tied to the US dollar. And the US is experiencing one of the largest inflation probably in their history.
Which is different to our inflation, by the way. Their inflation is different to our inflation.
No, there are different control measures.
Mhm.
But what causes the effect of it are literally the same. There are different controls. We could take
Yes or
different
no?
controls over our inflation.
Their inflation
However,
is demand pull. Our inflation is more important, but imported. Sorry, but go ahead,
Well,
caller.
I won't agree it's that simple with regards to the difference. But go ahead,
yeah,
caller.
but the factors affecting the inflation. Yeah, let me continue. And I think that you all were a bit hard on her because, as your colleague mentioned, is that when she, as soon as she came out of the cabinet meeting, cabinet didn't make a decision on that. So she had no other choice but to answer it that way. When she returned and came out the second time, then she was able to state exactly what is the government position. And I still think that the government doesn't have a position on it. Although she's talking about being proactive, I would agree with you all there. She's speaking about being proactive, but the government still have no ideas. Neither you, your colleague, both of you all don't have an idea as to what the future holds. So it would be unfair to the minister or unfair to cabinet to actually come up with a plan to resolve it. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity, and you have a nice day and a pleasant weekend.
You too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We
We have
have a
another
lot.
call.
You told us a lot. We'll respond off air.
I just want to quickly say in relation to the criticisms at the Minister of Trade. I mean, you made very fair points, and I give that to you. The issue is that we can't say that we agree, we don't know what the future holds, neither do they. But to come and tell us that they are proactively monitoring the situation, but then have no clue in terms of a decision making, you need a forward-thinking government. You don't want to wait for a government to wait to the situation to get to a point where we have to wait 2 weeks before we bring forward solutions. But 2 days prior to saying that, you're giving us budget tenants from last year. So that is my criticism. You can't say being proactively monitoring the situation, but you're not proactive in your thinking or your actions.
To put it in a different way, it's another example of the government's communication problem. Because you could have the same position and communicate it better. One thing, with regards to Dr. Israel, I did ask her about other types of foreign direct investment. And the answer, I think, she did not necessarily directly answer the question, but we had limited time.
I will respond to that comment about the news example just now, but we have a caller now with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Hi, morning, guys.
Good morning.
I haven't called for a while, but this situation that we're facing in terms of the flour and the commodity pricing and all these things that we're experiencing, it just goes to show that small nation, we are truly not an independent nation. A nation that could feed itself is truly an independent nation. We have not done that in the past 50 years. We were given the opportunity, we shut down the sugar, we shut down the rice, we shut down everything. And now we are at this point where every government, every successive government has spoken about diversification. That's all they did. It's been kicked around like a football, and all these years have passed, and there has been no diversification and no input into really bringing about diversification in the country. And so we are now suffering. Sean, you're right. We have the very rich and the very poor. There's no middle class in Trinidad. The middle class has been wiped out of Trinidad. And so we are now seeing people suffering on the street. We are now going to see people just to put bread on the table. Unemployment is going up every day. And we're going to see more crime because people, in order to survive, just to put something on the table, are going to turn to crime. We are in a real serious situation in this country. And I want to say to you all that while everybody talks, we have a lot of talk shops going on across the media and across the country, but there is no action taking place because even while I'm talking to all you, many things that are being said and given to the public through the news and the government is really just to manipulate the minds of the people. So I want to say to you all that this situation is not going to get better. It is going to get worse. And I might sound like a prophet of doom and doom, but definitely going to get worse. And we are not, we saying to ourselves, we are out of control here because external forces. That may be true to some point that we are not in control, but if we had been taking the right steps all along, we would have it under control. We are a reactive society. From government come down.
Yep.
A reactive society, and we are going to pay the price out. Have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you very much, Kola.
My only caveat to that is I think we underestimate how much other nations, bigger nations, are just as reactive at times as we are.
I don't think you are sounding as though you're prophets of doom and gloom. I think you're just being realistic.
I mean, I said it's going to get worse already. Then it got worse.
Going back to our neophyte from Dawadi, the example from Dr. Faith B. Israel. Now, I understand your position and the point that you were making. And I could understand where the example may not be the most suitable. My interpretation of that, which is why I did not necessarily, try to chastise the Dr. B. Israel on her points, is the fact that there are many aspects of foreign direct investments. And my interpretation was that if somebody from away is coming to the country, they're going to not only have to purchase property, but they're also going to have to spend money in order to settle down, which is foreign currency that will be pumped into the economy. As little as it may be foreign currency. And then this is not directly associated with FDI, but the mere fact that that nurse may be working in Trinidad and Tobago.
Influx of skills. Exactly,
influx of skills, as well as a circular flow of income, adding to the circular flow of income. So I think that is what the doctor meant. If she did not mean that, well, you're right. She may have to clarify her example.
Don't underestimate. Right now, California, I believe, was the 10th largest, or within the top 10 economies of the world. They have an issue where more people are leaving than are coming into California. They have a net reduction. So that is one aspect of it. And if you go, again, she is the Secretary of Health and Wellness. She is not the Secretary of Finance. The Secretary of Finance, who's also the Chief Secretary, he had a full presentation. He had a whole section on that. We have the clips. We did not play the clips because we had the Health Secretary with us today. With regards to the budget allocation, I just want to point out, for San Grande and Tobago, the challenges are different. And one of the best examples is during the pandemic. They did not have any sort of COVID isolation ward for a while, and they had to have a 5-hour Coast Guard ride for COVID patients at the start of the pandemic. That's just one of the different challenges that Tobago has to say any other part of the country. So while I understand we have to be fair and not just look at Tobago as some special existence, unfortunately they do have challenges that other local government areas don't necessarily have.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have for this morning's program. Thank you very much to all our callers for their contributions, as well as to Camille Pascal for once again joining us to contribute to the discussion surrounding the budget estimates for financial year 2022-2023, as well as Dr. Faith B. Israel for her commentary this morning. Sean Michael Small, though it has been only 4 days, it seems like a very long week that dragged on. I'm very glad it's over. I'm rather tired. I'm exhausted.
Just to repeat what one of our callers said, a nation that cannot feed itself is not independent. To flip.
Well,
to flip what he said.
I suppose that's one argument that you can make. But Sean Michael Small, thank you very much once more. And to everybody, thank you very much for joining us once more on Talking Point. I'm Keaton Shaw. Remember, today is a good day to have a good day because it's Friday.
Oh, TGIF.
And the weekend is ahead. So, all things good, fingers crossed. We'll see you again on Monday morning. Bye-bye.